It really is not an understatement to say meditation changed my life. And I was staying with my friend at this point in the time, and she was like, whoa, you are in deep. Being completely honest with you, my view of meditation back then was I hated it. Hello, and welcome back to the Manifest Edit podcast. Over the past 5 years, I've been meditating every single day, and I wanted to share with you some of the changes that have taken place over those 5 years, because honestly, there have been so many, and what started as a 1 week decision to see if anything changed in my life has been a 5-year journey and counting. I know there are a lot of misconceptions around meditation and how to actually meditate properly, what kind of changes you can expect to make. So I want to break it all down, give you the tea so you can decide whether it's something that you want to add to your spiritual toolbox and maybe even begin to develop a consistent practice around like I have. But before we get into the takeaways, I want to share with you where my journey with meditation even began. I first began meditating when I was around 8 or 10 years old, and the reason for this was because we moved next to a Buddhist monastery in Scotland and we became Buddhist. As a result of becoming Buddhist, we would regularly go to the temple, we would take refuge, and we would meditate. And being completely honest with you, my view of meditation back then was I hated it. Like, I really could not get on board with it because I found it incredibly challenging. The reason why I found it so challenging was because I had this misconception that in order to meditate properly, you had to completely release your mind of any thoughts, and anytime you catch yourself thinking, boom, then you have to go straight back to the start and you were a bad meditator. As a child, that was the belief I held about meditation, and having thoughts zooming at 100 miles an hour constantly throughout the entire practice actually brought on a lot of anxiety for me, which is like the opposite of what meditation is supposed to do. And I've also perceived from working with clients that this is a misconception that a lot of people hold, feeling that meditation needs to look or feel a certain way in order to be doing it correctly, or trying not to think and then getting carried away with the thoughts. Like, there is a lot of chatter, and really there's a lot. And so choosing to come back to meditation was something that I decided to do in 2019 after I was going through a particularly challenging period of my life where I just felt lost. I was really at a crossroads between my old life and my new life, and I really wasn't sure what direction to take. I was experiencing all-time high levels of anxiety. I was beginning to feel quite depressed, and I was just searching for something to ground me again. And I'd previously meditated on the Headspace app, so I thought about downloading an app like that again, but for some reason I ended up downloading the app Insight Timer, and I think this was like such a divine download because this is part of the reason that I've been meditating every day for the past 5 years. Initially, I downloaded that app and I set myself the challenge of meditating every day for a week. I didn't just want to do it for one day because I didn't feel like that was enough information to see whether or not it had been working for me, and I didn't want to commit to a huge time period like a month because as I said before, I had all of those negative misconceptions about meditation. So I really just wanted this like short, manageable period of time that was long enough to see whether I noticed any effects, whether it had any impact on changing my mood. And what happened over the next week truly was life-changing. On top of my anxiety being reduced, I really felt much more creative. I had a lot more space in my mind to separate thoughts and to think about things. And I also wasn't putting so much pressure on myself to be devoid of thought. I was actually giving myself that space, that conscious space to explore what was coming up for me in a way that I hadn't really done before. So seeing those incredible results from that 1 week, I thought, well, what's the point in stopping it now? If this is something that has genuinely been helping me, why would I stop that? And so I decided to keep going with it. And then 5 years later and counting, here we are. If you've been looking to start a meditation practice, or you're wondering how meditation can impact your life, that's what I'm going to be breaking down in this episode. And I'm also going to be sharing with you some surprising things that have come about from having a consistent meditation practice, as well as some of the pitfalls that I have experienced as well. But before we do that, make sure to hit subscribe so that you get updated on all future episodes of the Manifest Edit podcast, where I'm sharing insights and advice exactly like this. Some of the main misconceptions that I had about meditation was that in order to meditate, you have to be devoid of thought, right? That was a really big one for me, was like, you can't think at all. And if you think, then you're not meditating well or you're not meditating good. And honestly, this couldn't be further from the truth. Absolutely, there are some people who can really get into that space where they are having few thoughts or they're having a very focused attention. But for me, a lot of the time, I like to use meditation as a space where I can go, and it's an exploration for me. I give myself the space to see what thoughts are going to come up. Maybe there's something specific that I want to think on or get ideas on. And other times it is just a place where I'm able to slow those thoughts down or get into a really, really relaxed state. We have different brainwave states in our mind, and using meditation, you're able to get into those slower levels of brainwaves like theta, that put you in this deep state of relaxation and also make you really suggestible as well, which is a great place to be in for manifestation and putting new suggestions into your subconscious mind to reprogram your mindset. The other thing that I thought about meditation was that it's either something that you're good at or something that you're bad at. You're either a good meditator or a bad meditator, and there's nowhere in between. Even now, 5 years on, I wouldn't use those terms to describe myself as being someone who's good at meditation or someone who's bad at meditation. All I would say is that I'm someone who enjoys the practice of meditation. And I think the more you can release the pressure that you put on yourself for it to look or feel a certain way, the much more you're going to get out of your experience. And that was certainly what I found, was that by giving myself this permission to explore and to play around with it, I was able to build a really beautiful practice. And when I'm working with my clients, it's really important for me to make clear up front that it's not about being good or bad, it's about your personal experience with that practice. And on top of that, the final misconception that we're going to go into in this episode is this idea that in order to meditate, you have to listen to a certain style of music. It's like a really relaxing, calm type of music, and you're lying or you're sitting down, which absolutely can be one way to meditate. But you can also meditate in the shower. You can meditate on a walk. I've meditated to techno music, to house music. There's someone that I really love right now, and he's kind of blowing up on social media, called Lincoln Jesser, and he does music with singing bowls where they're tuned to certain frequencies, so you're listening to that music at a high frequency. So really give yourself the permission to make your practice your own and to play around with it. So if you're thinking about beginning a meditation practice, here's how you can get started. Whether it's something that you're coming back to or you are meditating for the first time, I really recommend, to begin with, picking a small amount of time to get started with. Like, rather than coming into it and saying, I'm going to meditate for an hour every day, and that might feel like a real shock to your nervous system. It might feel really overwhelming, and then you're not going to keep up with it, because we are not used to sitting and being with ourselves for that longer period of time. And another reason why I think meditation is so important now more than ever is because we are being programmed to have shorter and shorter spans of attention. So you'll be watching a TikTok, it scroll, like your mind can't keep still. Or you're watching a TV program, but then you've also got your phone going on in the background, and you need that extra stimulation just to keep you interested. And I've got several of my friends, and I'm someone who's like a movie buff. I love going to the movies and watching movies. And I have a lot of my friends who say, well, I really struggle to sit through an entire movie. It's too long for me, which is crazy, because back in the day, we used to have TV series with 22 episodes. Now people aren't even able to sit through something for just like 1 hour. Crazy. So bearing that in mind, give yourself a small amount of time that you are going to dedicate to this practice. Now, in an ideal situation, I would recommend 10 minutes. Around about 10 minutes, because I feel like 5 minutes is a little bit on the shorter side, and 10 minutes is for myself, is when I really begin to notice the effects. From 10 minutes to an hour is really my sweet spot. It's taken some time to build up to that, but I found that actually the longer I meditate now, I get a deeper impact from it. And even a few months ago, like 30 minutes was the max that I would really spend on a meditation without maybe noticing that I was getting distracted or I was wanting to come out of it and I wasn't noticing any additional effects. And then when I was away in Bali earlier this year, I was doing meditations that were an hour long, and I was so in the zone. And I was staying with my friend at this point in the time. She was like, whoa, you are in deep. Although I was really deep in that meditation process, I didn't feel like I was there for an hour. You kind of lose that concept of time the deeper into your practice that you go. Although 10 minutes now may sound long, it really isn't long like once you get into it. And especially at the beginning when you're with guided meditations and you're just listening to someone else talk, 10 minutes passes pretty quickly, I found. So I would recommend 10 minutes. Obviously, it's up to you what you decide to go into, but I would say at least 10 minutes to really begin to notice those effects. And I do also recommend setting yourself a challenge, like I'm going to do this every day for a week, I'm going to do this every day for a month. Don't commit to doing a year straight up. I think a week or a month or 2 weeks is a good amount of time to say that you're going to commit to something and trial something out, because what can happen for a lot of people is that I'm just going to try it for a day, and okay, I tried this practice and it obviously doesn't work because I didn't notice any effects. Well, nothing that you do for the first time typically is going to have immediate effects, right? It's not going to be life-changing the first time that you do it. For the vast majority of people, I'm not saying that it's not possible, but for the vast majority of people, you're not going to notice those instantaneous changes. So you need to actually give yourself the time and the space to see how it impacts you. I'm someone who believes that we all have different spiritual practices that resonate with us on a deep level. Meditation for sure is one of mine, and I feel so blessed to have spent the last 5 years going deeper into my practice and learning more about myself as a result of that. But you need to find what works for you, and you need to find how meditation works for you if that is your practice as well. And one of the ways you're going to find out how it works for you is by giving yourself a period of time where you're just open to exploring, right? You have no expectations on what's going to happen or anything other than I've made this commitment to myself. Let's just see what comes up over the next month. So when I've set myself challenges in the past, I love to have that kind of time period on it where I'm just an observer. I'm like a scientist carrying out an experiment and I'm seeing what the results are. And in the past, I've done periods of sobriety. I think I did 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months. And at the beginning of those time periods, I didn't say, well, I'm going to be sober for 3 months. I'm going to be sober for 6 months. I'm going to be sober for 9 months, because the enormity of it would have thrown me off from actually participating in it. And that is what I want you to bear in mind when you're going into a practice like consistent meditation. Something else that can be really powerful for this is using an app like Insight Timer. That's one of the apps that I use for meditations, as well as my own meditations that I record and listen to, as well as my hypnosis. And the great thing about the Insight Timer app is it actually logs all the days for you. So every day you track a session on Insight Timer, it tells you how many consecutive days that you've done, and you don't just have to use the app to do it. So if I'm doing one of my own meditations or I'm listening to another meditation, I will just go into Insight Timer and add in the minutes or how long that I did that other meditation for, so that it still counts towards my consecutive practice. So find a way to keep track of it. Maybe you have sticky notes, maybe you have a calendar that you tick off, or maybe you use Insight Timer just to keep on top of it and also to monitor your progress. You might also want to buy a meditation journal, and then any downloads that you have over that time. So any intuitive things that you feel called to do, any ideas that come up, any feelings that come up, it's a good idea to keep track of it so that you can have something tangible that reflects your progress. Because sometimes what can happen is you have a meditation and you have a really deep practice and you're like, whoa, I feel amazing. And then you're going into the rest of your day and life is happening, and then you forget how amazing that you felt in that moment. So it is good to keep note and take track of something like that in a really tangible way, so that you don't go into those limiting thoughts of, oh, well, nothing happened because I can't remember it. So have your minimum viable product, or your minimum viable amount that you're going to commit to. So you might say, I'm going to do at least 10 minutes, and then some days you'll do 15 minutes, other days you'll do 10 minutes, and that's what you've committed to, and that's how you're going to be able to measure your progress, because you're doing those similar amounts of time every single day. The third thing is, don't expect your results to be immediate. And it's really going to depend what place you're at in your life. For me, I was very anxious. I was feeling some feelings of depression as well. And I noticed instantly that I was beginning to feel lighter. My entire situation didn't change overnight. But what did happen was, by doing that meditation practice consistently, I was actually able to free up all the anxious thoughts that were running on a loop inside my head. And by freeing up my mind from some of those anxious thoughts I was having, I was actually able to create space for expansive thoughts. And so having the space to have expansive thoughts or to have ideas come up meant that I was able to get myself out of that situation where I was feeling boxed in and I didn't know where to go next. Having the freedom to think wow, it can do so much for you. And we are creative beings at our core. We deeply yearn to be creative and to express that creativity. For me, things like talking, showing up and teaching, writing, those are all ways I express my creativity. For someone else, it might be art, it might be singing, it might be through your career, your business. And meditation is a practice that I've really found that not just helps me, but has helped my clients connect with that version of them, that creative essence that is seeking to explore. That isn't necessarily going to happen overnight, that you're going to wake up and then the next day you have all of these creative ideas, but that has certainly happened to me in the past. I'm just saying, don't put so much pressure on yourself to have everything figured out in a day or in a couple of days. This is another reason why having that meditation journal or manifestation journal can be useful, to kind of track those ideas as they're coming up and to make sense of them. Because another thing is that in meditation, you get a chance to communicate with your higher self. This might look like words, it might look like signs, it might look like symbols. And at the time, it may not necessarily make sense to you. I remember a few years ago now that I was meditating, and I can't remember the specific word. I know I've spoken about it on another podcast interview, but I think I had just like this repeated word that came up in my meditation, and I couldn't make sense of it at the time, but it was around boundaries and having firm boundaries. And later on throughout that month, I had this situation come up where my boundaries were really tested. Someone that I really admired and looked up to at the time had invited me to work for her in her business. However, she had invited me to work for her business unpaid, despite me having 2 degrees and a ton of experience in that field. I had to not be blindsided by, this is someone that I really admire, and stand firm in my boundaries and say, I would love to work for you, but I definitely expect to be paid for my work and what I'm going to do. Ultimately, that relationship didn't work out. And to be honest, it did make me lose respect for that person, because it did feel exploitative of my talent and of what I brought to the table. But had I not had that come up in my meditation, that I was going to need to be firm in my boundaries, I might have had stars in my eyes and been like, oh well, what's the worry, I can just do this and then maybe later on she's going to pay me. It just was so clear because of that was not aligned with who I wanted to be and the direction that I was taking my life and business as well. Physically, you may notice some of those changes take place. Like I noticed, for me, instantly after my meditation, I feel so much calmer. Sometimes even I open my eyes and the room I'm in looks different. Right? It sounds weird to say, but the room I'm in just has this kind of dreamier haze, and it's difficult to put into words my physical reaction. So this is another reason why you just have to get out there and do it for yourself and notice how your physicality changes as a result of committing to this practice. Initially, I did begin to notice those physical changes. Within the first week, I was noticing that my nervous system was much more regulated. I felt much more calmer. Those anxious thoughts were definitely quieting down. And then as time progressed, I found that I was able to build a relationship with my higher self. I was able to connect with my spirit guides. I felt like I had this direct line to the universe as a result of slowing down to listen. There are so many things in life that take us away from this inner voice and this inner knowing that we have. And for me, meditation really allowed me to dial back in and trust myself again on a much deeper level, and to allow myself to be supported and to access those internal resources that were inside of me all along. Some other things that I've noticed as a result of meditating for that consistent period of time is that awkward silences really aren't that awkward to me anymore. Like I'll often be in conversation and I'm just leaving space for that other person to jump back in. My friends will often be like, okay, I'm done talking now. I'm like, oh, I was just like giving space. Whereas before, if there was a gap in conversation or there was a silence in conversation, I would feel the need to fill it or to say something, or why isn't the other person talking, and really ruminating on why that was. It also gave me space to reevaluate what was important to me and notice where some areas of my life were just like no longer making sense, or relationships that I was choosing to entertain in my life were not aligned with the highest version of me. I really learned how to be with myself and be in my body, and especially during lockdown, this was something that I really valued was this time to connect with myself in a period of time where I honestly felt very lonely. And although I wasn't able to connect with my friends as much as I would have liked to, I felt really lucky to have this space where I was able to connect with myself and listen to myself. And finally, meditation also led me to breath work, which is one of my absolute favorite practices, and it's really taken me on this journey of being able to incorporate more somatic work into my practice as a coach, where mindset work is so important, manifestation work, all the spiritual connection is really important, but what ties all of those things together is the mind-body connection, and having the tools at your fingertips to change how you're feeling physically so you can change how you're feeling mentally, change how you're feeling mentally so you can change how you're feeling physically. It really is not an understatement to say meditation changed my life, and I honestly don't know where I would be if I hadn't made that decision on that depressing day in 2019 to just take a risk on something that I thought would make me feel better. You may be at a place right now where your life is not a total dumpster fire, or things feel like they're going well, but I say that they can always get better. Or maybe you're at a place where you are finding things challenging, you're feeling a little bit lost, and you're wondering how to get back on track. This can absolutely be the tool that helps you to do that as well. Maybe there is a specific goal that you want to get from your meditation practice. Maybe you want to feel more connected, maybe you want to feel more creative, or maybe you just want to give yourself the chance to explore and get to know yourself on a deeper level. But all of these things are possible if you just give yourself the opportunity to try. Don't get put off by trying something new or needing to be perfect or looking a certain way when you're meditating. I know that you maybe see this day in the life videos and people are looking all sweet, Sometimes in my meditation, I'm happy, I'm laughing, I'm smiling. Sometimes in my meditation, I feel anger come up. I feel rage, I feel sadness, and all of those emotions are so valid. When was the last time you sat with yourself and you really gave yourself permission to experience the full spectrum of your emotions? Anger is not a bad thing. Sadness is not a bad thing. None of these negative emotions are a bad thing. It's these emotions that go repressed or that go unexpressed that then lead to things blowing up, that then lead us to communicating in a way that isn't effective, that then lead to us feeling bad about ourselves. But when you actually give yourself the space to express these emotions or to witness these emotions and to hold yourself, they don't take over your entire life. They don't completely derail you anymore. And what blessing that is to have a tool at your fingertips that makes all of that possible. If you were to ask me what meditation changed in my life, honestly, I would have to say everything. Every single area of my life has changed as a result of me deepening my meditation practice and also deepening my spiritual connection. And imagine what it could do for you if you made the decision to be consistent with your practice. If you're just getting started, or if you're looking for a meditation to help you deepen your own practice, I'll link some of mine below in the show notes to help guide you on your journey. So remember, pick a small amount of time to begin with and be consistent with it for a period of time. Don't place too many expectations on yourself. See what comes up and keep track of the changes that you're noticing and that you're experiencing. Don't expect results to happen overnight, but also remember that anything can happen. That's it for me on this week's episode, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.